Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. I'm sorry for the day off. Maybe I'll release this episode late at night, but I got food poisoning. I have been weak. I have been just shooting stuff out both ends. It's been terrible, but we're back. I'm feeling a little better. I took some vitamin B. I got a bunch of water here. We're back into it. I apologize for the day off or the late episode, whatever this turns out to be. Let's get right into it. We got Joe Rogan, Mike Benz sitting down to talk. Now, what they're talking about is a training session to censor Trump. This is very interesting. And not Trump when he was running for president, a sitting president. This is a very interesting clip. I want you guys to see this. And then I'm going to talk about the Mike Benz, Joe Rogan episode, because I just feel like this could have been way better than it actually was. Not criticizing Joe, kind of maybe, but I just think that this could have been way, way better. But this is a very interesting part of the episode where Donald Trump is being spoken about at a censorship. It's like a censorship training. So it's journalists and people in media, and they're all being trained on how to censor Trump or how to figure out like an excuse to censor him. It's very interesting. Let's get right into it. Let's start here with the Rogan clip, of course.
Yeah, I think you need, yeah.
This is still probably going to bring up what you talked about on other ones, though.
There you go. That's the top one. Okay. So here you go.
Censorship training session.
Yes. So can I tell you a little backstory on this real
Trump
quick?
tweets Brexit slogans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, give me some background.
So okay, all right.
First.
So if you pause, if you pause right there on the thumbnail, if you just see it real quick. Okay. So I found this video in 2019. You know, my whole life has been 24/7, morning, noon, night, tracking, watching. I know these people closer than my own friends and family. This is, you know, I found this video, I think at around the 5 or 6 hour mark of a day two of, I found this, I think at 5 or 6 hour mark of a 9-hour video in June 2019, where this is basically the month before the Bob Mueller investigation. And they wanted to pre-censor and throttle Trump's ability to be able to, fight off charges that he was a Russian asset. Because at the time, the Pentagon and the intelligence community want him out. If you remember, the Ukraine impeachment in 2019 came from Ciaramella, the CIA agent, came from the Vindman brothers, who were the military. Basically, Trump had a big beef with the existing brass of the Pentagon and the intelligence community over Russia policy, over Eurasia policy, which is a whole thing that we can maybe talk about if you're interested. But so the Atlantic Council was one of the very, very, very first movers in the censorship industry space. I mentioned how this really started in 2014 with 25 years of free speech diplomacy sort of ended with the 2014 Ukraine fiasco because of this Gerasimov doctrine, hybrid warfare thing. And I mentioned that that's when NATO began setting down infrastructure to censor the internet. And that's what snowballed into what we now have. And so the Atlantic Council effectively bills itself as NATO's think tank. That's what it's known as in Washington. You know, there's, the places like the Council on Foreign Relations are sort of more known for Chamber of Commerce and big business sort of working on government policy. The Atlantic Council is one of these that's for NATO. And it's basically NATO's clandestine civilian, sort of civil military arm. When there's a NATO military agenda that needs massaging at the political level, they need laws passed, they need sanctions put in place, they need capacity building on the civilian side to help a military thing. That's what the Atlantic Council primarily does. And I'm not even opining on whether much of what they do, I'm not even saying good or bad organization, but they set up something called the Digital Forensics Research Lab basically right on the heels of the Crimea and Eastern Ukraine counter coup. And it was one of the earliest NATO U.S. military liaised internet censorship shops that targeted populist governments, Trump, the whole UK, Italy, Germany, Spain network that I talked about, Bolsonaro, right out the gate. And so this video was, again, right before Russiagate ended, and they thought they could put Trump in prison with this. And this was a training session that they did for journalists and fact checkers in June 2019. You'll see this session is an interactive session. It's called I Call Bullshit. And by the way, Ben Nimmo, he's at the Atlantic Council in this one, but he goes on shortly after this to be effectively the technical lead for Graphica, the same Pentagon. And by the way, he had started his career in the NATO press shop, basically doing media work for NATO. Then he goes over, and again, we fund all of this, but let's just watch and we'll show you this. Oh, I think
anybody who works in this space will, I think, acknowledge that in any information operation, it's not just lies. You take a grain of truth, and they will build a pearl of disinformation around it. When we're in this space, there isn't a simple binary true or false. There are all kinds of shades of meaning in between. Now, there are various different ways of modeling how you can identify the ways in which people are trying to twist the story. And
wait for it, this gets good.
Because it's short and because, frankly, I developed it, is the 4 Ds. Dismiss, distort, distract, and dismay. These are the 4 responses that we see time and again.
Not false. None of these are false.
Like us,
how can we get censored anyway?
Uncomfortable evidence.
All of you should have some of these cards on the table. If you don't look on another table and steal one that's not being used, because these are going to help get our attention. We are going to go through a set of slides showing quotes from different organizations and individuals who are using certain rhetorical devices to make their argument. And so if you go through all of them, at least one of these 4 will apply. Again, dismiss, distort, distract, dismay. Everyone say it with me. Dismiss,
Jesus Christ.
distort, distract, dismay. Excellent. You're welcome to scream, I call bullshit too, if you're comfortable, but it's not.
This is all funded by U.S. taxpayers.
So with that, let's play.
Witch hunt.
How can you censor the sitting president arguing that what he said is disinformation? How can you tell the tech platforms that that tweet is disinformation?
Thank you.
Get creative.
Well, it's obviously it can be any number of the Ds. You can say it's distorting what they're saying or distracting them from whatever the issue is saying. The issue isn't real. They're just after me because, as they're witches and it's evil, I'm the injured party here. So it could be a whole lot of them. Trump's got a nice range when it comes to disinformation.
Does anyone have a number 1 pick that they would like to mention related to this one? They said dismiss.
Yes, dismiss.
Dismiss?
Dismiss. Yeah.
Other voices?
How many of you think dismissed? Raise your card, please. I think we're onto something here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you're right that underneath that attempt there are, he's twisting the story, he's accusing somebody else of the same thing, right? But the main thing is what he's saying is like, don't listen to them because it's a witch hunt. So that was our first one.
All right, number 2.
Getting topical here.
Pro-Brexit.
Cards up when you have an idea.
This is a Brexit ad saying
here,
we should be
just wait for
spending
the
the
mic.
money on our own national health system instead of funding the EU.
Distort.
Any other takers? Any suggestions?
Well, let's ask, how many of you think this one has distort involved?
Jesus Christ.
Okay, that's a lot. Any other?
They seem so
rhetorical
happy to
devices anyone
comply.
wants to mention? We've got a big hand over here. Let's. Oh, were you just kept your hand up? Her hand goes back down. Are there any others, or are we just going to stick with that one? Yes, man, right here. Distract. Okay, so for those who couldn't hear, it's also distract because it's trying to focus attention on the NHS rather than the vote itself.
Yeah. So, okay.
One more example of.
So this goes on, but what you'll see is this is the exact political adversary group that the intelligence, diplomatic, and military structure is trying to stop. Donald Trump, Brexit in the UK. And, if you ever wondered why is it that everyone got all on board and suddenly started doing this all together, they were literally having years of these consensus building. You want to get your career made if you're at the Poynter Institute or the International Fact-Checking Union, or if you're on the disinformation beat for the Washington Post or NPR or Le Monde in France or the Frankfurt Allgemeiner in Germany. You get your bona fides by going to these, and you get effectively accredited by the blob. And we're literally training people to find creative ways to mass flag. You can't even run a Brexit ad saying, hey, we should be spending $350 million on ourselves rather than the EU. That's disinformation. Not false. They're saying it's not false. There's any number of ways that we can use to put pressure on the tech platforms to call this disinformation. You're hosting disinformation simply because it's not the agenda item that we want here. And again, there's 7 CIA directors currently on the board of that organization. Those placards reading, I call bull, were paid for by us.
It's just wild to watch everybody happily comply, enthusiastically, try to find ways that this makes any sense with no one having a counter narrative, no one standing up and go, well, wait a minute, who's to decide? What if it turns out it is, and it was a witch hunt? Now we know all that Russiagate stuff was 100% bull.
Right.
So he was correct.
Right. But remember, the Mueller disaster wouldn't happen until just the following month.
Right.
So at the time, they thought, great, if we can get him censored around calling this a witch hunt, then once the findings come in, he's going to be cornered. He won't even be able to defend himself. It'll be like a internet gag order.
Right. Headline readers and low information voters overwhelmingly believed it.
Right. Now, I should note that, this is another thing Elon was a huge game changer on. A lot of these people did not begin to sort of navel gaze and self-reflect on this until there was political and social blowback. The fact is there were a lot of these people who in 2017, 2018 were looking around at these. I've watched thousands of hours of these, consensus building meetings. They literally, there would be some debate in 2017 about whether or not we should do this tactic or whether or not, this goes too far. And I watched as these people basically let those early inhibitions go as the thing took wings and as the money poured in, because that's why I always emphasize the censorship industry. If you get rid of the money, you get rid of the glamour, you get rid of the career track, you get rid of the power, you get rid of the networks. And so to me, it's the fact is if these people could not have their careers made by doing this, they wouldn't be pursuing those careers.
Man, very interesting stuff. Calling this whole thing a training session, very diabolical. Can't believe that this is what was happening, but it all starts to make a lot of sense. That makes so much sense. That's why I'll talk about Mike Benz in a second, like I said, but let's just touch on some of the things that have happened with Trump. See, like if you guys remember this is the bloodbath comment that was supposed to be so violent for everyone in America. Listen.
Mexico has taken over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it, went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. No, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole, that's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories. A friend of mine.
And they just went on a rampage on him. But it makes sense why all of a sudden this happens, right? These are all articles that were written as soon as he said it. As soon as he said it, boom, boom. Trump says some migrants are not people and predicts a bloodbath if he loses. That was the New York Times that said that. CNBC, Trump says there will be a bloodbath if he doesn't get elected in November as he campaigns, blah, blah, blah. Trump warns of bloodbath for auto industry, and country if he loses. Notice how CNN almost went truthful there and then said, and country if he loses. So they went right back to the violence. Donald Trump warns of bloodbath if not elected. They're just going straight for the violence. But the fact that they all came out, like, what are these? 11 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours. The fact that they all came out at the same time around. You kind of go, oh, how does that happen? And we always just say, well, they're all in cahoots together and they're working against Trump. But there's actual training towards this type of thing. But here's the thing. Here's why I say this. Because if you remember the clip where they were talking about distort, dismay, dismiss, distract, the reason that they all report on the bloodbath thing is so they can mass flag anyone who talks about it because they're trying to connect it to violence. Trump's not connecting it to violence when he says it. He's connecting it to the automotive industry and the way that, things will plummet and be horrible. And he's comparing that to a bloodbath. He's saying bloodbath. It's like a stock term. If you owned 15 stocks and they all went down one day, you'd see a bunch of red bars. It'd be like a bloodbath, So they're trying to connect that to violence. Once you connect it to violence, you can now mass flag. Or you can put it under any of these things. Distort, dismay. I guess that would be put under dismay. Let's do some censorship training, guys. Which one would the bloodbath comment fall under? Distort, dismay, dismiss, distract. I think it would be dismay. And if they can classify it as that, then they can go about mass flagging it. And that's why they work so hard in unison to do that to Trump. Now, this was at a point where he wasn't on Twitter. Actually, no, he was actually reported back on. He was allowed back onto Twitter at that point. Facebook as well, I'm pretty sure. And YouTube and Rumble. And yeah, he was everywhere. Instagram. So when they do that, they're trying to give rise, because now they can turn to those companies and say, he said something pretty violent about everybody in the country. X didn't bite. X wouldn't do that. A lot of other companies would not do that. I talked about it on YouTube. YouTube did not censor me at all that I know of. YouTube was good about that. Maybe it's because of the way I explain things. Maybe because I didn't connect it to violence. I don't know. But that's the attempt that they're trying to do when they do stuff like that. Very, very interesting. The fact that Mike Benz broke it down that way, that if the whole Mueller fiasco disaster didn't happen, they would have had him in this internet gag order. He wouldn't have been able to defend himself at all. It's wild. And obviously he's not the first person that they've done that to. Now, when we're talking about Mike Benz, I will say, when it comes to this episode, I found this episode extremely boring. I know some of you guys love Mike Benz. I love him too. I've seen him on Tucker. I follow him on X. I follow him everywhere you can follow him. I do. But I found this episode to be so boring. And I was like, wow. I'm like, why is this happening? And here's the reason that I say this, okay? Because he's on Joe Rogan's podcast. Joe Rogan has a great way of humanizing people. But how does Joe Rogan humanize people? He does it by asking questions and having a conversation. This episode was not a conversation. It was just dense information. He could have asked questions. Here's a great question. Was Biden signing off on all this stuff while he was president? Was Obama? Or was Trump even? Or does this happen behind them? All of this stuff that we hear about. Because he was breaking down a lot of stuff. Do they have to sign off? Is it happening behind their back? Right? How about this? Tulsi Gabbard is now the director of national intelligence, who actually oversees the IC, which is the intelligence community. Now that she's in power, now that she has this power, is she able to stop all this? Will she be able to report this type of stuff to Trump and then Trump can stop it? Like, what power does she have now? Does this cause a disruption in what they're trying to do? Why does the left benefit from all of this way more than the right? If it's happening in the shadows and it's an apolitical entity, why doesn't it just happen to both sides crazily? Why is it only one side that tends to benefit from it? Like, there's so many questions that you could ask this guy. If Kamala won, do you think she would be on board with it? Do you think she would take it to the next level? Do you know if she's even in cahoots with any of this? Which is why she was so for censorship of X and getting Elon Musk out of the position of owning the company. There's just so many questions you could ask this guy, and none of them were asked. And he just put out this dense, Joe said maybe 100 words, maybe 200. I don't know. I just don't find episodes like that good. Like, if you got to ask this guy questions that are pertaining to today, to right now. That's why I picked that clip, because that was the one clip that he showed us, that was the one part of the episode where he actually push things, not just towards Trump, because I have a bias, big Trump supporter, that, not just towards Trump, but towards an actual situation that happened, that we were being deceived. Actually, that's big. You need to know more of that. I don't know, man. Like I just found it to be, and then all of a sudden I'm looking and I find this clip of Mike Benz and I'm like, where was this version of Mike Benz? Listen to this.
NATO. You guys want to see the receipts on this? Its tanks to tweets doctrine, saying that the new role of NATO is no. You guys want to see the receipts on that? It's pretty funny. NATO headquarters, Brussels. Yes, hello. I am here to announce NATO is going to take over Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Reddit. Any questions?
NATO must remain prepared for both conventional and hybrid threats, from tanks to tweets. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me roll that tape back. Look how he looks directly in the camera for the first time in the speech, right when he hits that operatic high note.
And hybrid threats, from tanks to tweets. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
NATO must control your tweets. I got to play this one more time.
Both conventional and hybrid threats, from tanks to tweets.
You mother...
Thank you very much. This concludes this.
How can you say that? How can you say that? How can you just sit there as a military official and say that? Yeah, I wanted to put that on a Jumbotron. Yeah, I wanted to put that on Rogan. Why didn't I put that on? Well, I should have stopped and said, pull the clip. The world needs to see this. This is the head of NATO, the General Secretary of NATO, sticking his wang in your face and saying, we are the media now. Not NBC, not CNN, not the New York Times. NATO.
Further, we have the full range of tools to address these challenges. NATO must remain prepared for both conventional and hybrid threats, from tanks to tweets.
Go f yourself.
This concludes this press point.
How is that? I mean, that has been allowed to stand for 5 years. Technically 8 years, okay? And you look at the hybrid warfare addition to the NATO charter in Warsaw in 2016, the month after Brexit. Damn, I should have put that on the Jumbotron. Damn.
Where was this version of this guy? Well, he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Are you kidding me? That was the first thing I wrote. As soon as I saw the clip, I said, where was this version of you on Rogan, man? What's going on? Are you kidding me right now? This would have been incredible. If he had this type of passion, if he was breaking things down like that, that would have been something. Now, I'm not saying that the episode was bad. It wasn't bad. It was dense information. It was a lot of information. I listened to every episode twice. You would probably have to listen to this episode about 3 times to really take in what he's saying. But at the end of the day, when it's such dense information, people have to really sum up what they're hearing within this 2 hours and 47 minutes that the podcast was. And all you're really going to take away from it is corruption and censorship. But we know about corruption and censorship. What people today need is, where is it? How are they doing it to me in everyday life? How do I avoid it? How do I possibly stop it? Why hasn't anyone, my congressperson, my senator, my governor, why haven't they stopped it? Can I ask them to stop it? Is this something that they have within their power, at least within my state? There's so many different things that you need. But when you just give people 10,000 words of information, you say, here you go, man, people, that's exactly why so many laws get passed. You know how many laws will happen to you that will get passed and you had the ability to read them, but you didn't? Because they're 18, they're 40, they're 800-page crazy essays. You could read them, but it's just hard. That's why President Trump was so smart If you went to his website, his whole strategy was just parsed out in video format, no clip longer than 3 minutes and 48 seconds. No clip longer than that. He just gave you clip after clip of everything he planned on doing, all on his website, all on YouTube. Done. Very smart move. And then he went on every podcast and talked about what he wanted to do. And when he was on a podcast, it was the top 3 things. His website, it was everything. But that's how you need it to be in this day and age. You can't just have this dense lecture form type of thing. All right, that's my TED Talk, man. It's my TED Talk. But other than that, Mike Benz is a solid dude. He was on Tucker Carlson. I think he might have been on Tucker Carlson twice in rather close proximity. Gave a great interview on Tucker Carlson. I think Tucker Carlson asked some questions. He was great on Rogan. He's great on everything that you're going to see him on. A lot of the same information that you hear on Tucker, you're going to hear on Rogan. But, all in all, great guy. Just, I wish they did this episode a little different. Just a little different. Here's a simple question. Do you think that the Democrats know about this and that they're allowing it to happen? Is it possible that they're clued in on this, which is why everything that they tend to want to do in silence correlates with the people behind the scenes and what they want to do in silence? Very simple questions. Just could have changed the whole thing dramatically. But again, anyways, that's the only clip I'm going to do on this episode, honestly. Other than that, guys, like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and go check out the episode. I'm out.